Hi everyone, this is Ashutosh, and today we'll be talking about the Keshwan and Bharti case or doctrine of basic structure. Right? The basic structure doctrine, as you know, is a very important aspect of understanding how the judiciary has evolved or how the judicial review in this country has evolved over a period of time. This topic becomes very vital for mains, so I'll just be dealing with this one particular question, right? We call this session as the GS Paper 2, Polity and Governance, right? Q&A. And one of the themes today is this, right? It will be very brief and short, but it will give you a very important idea, right, on which a question can be asked in the exam. Fine. So it is mostly for mains, as you know. So let us take up one question which has been repeatedly asked, right, on this idea. So how we can take one new dimension of the same question, right? Has Keshwanand Bharti case, right, or the doctrine of basic structure, has it led to or has it created the conditions for judicial overreach? Fine. So we'll try to understand some basic things and then we'll talk about this question. So imagine this is a question, right, in your mains. So how do we deal with a question? This is also very important, right? When writing answers in general studies paper, it becomes very vital to first focus only on the core of the question. The general studies does not demand a lot of peripheral or a lot of superfluous arguments, right? It mainly focuses on the core of the question. So answer has to be very pinpointed, very clear cut, right? Focused directly. Now let's say Keshwanan Bharti case, specific case is there, which somewhere I would not say it started, initiated, right? The idea was initiated long back, right? Basic structure and judicial overreach. Right? What is important is first to understand. So first thing is to first clarify what is the doctrine of basic structure. So your answer must start with this. But as you know, you're not writing an objective answer. You're not taking an MCQ. You're writing a descriptive answer. So better is to give a little context, right? Or a little overview, right? So you can start, when I say introduction, you can just start with the idea, simple idea, right? That how or what are the constitutional or what is the constitutional philosophy regarding the distribution of power amongst the organs or organs of the state. So how constitution views the state, right? So you can start with very basic idea, right? Namely what you can call as introduction. So how constitution visualizes the distribution of power amongst the various organs of the state. Now see, for this purpose, we'll have to simplify, right, that there is a preamble. The preamble establishes basically the core philosophies, right, whether it is justice, social, political, economic, right, or whether it talks about democratic secularism, right, or socialist democratic secular nation. Fine. So somewhere it establishes the core philosophy. From here you should start because this sets the tone for your answer. Otherwise, if you just go and write objectively that basic doctrine or the philosophy of basic structure was born in this, but then you're not giving the context. You're not giving the actual idea from where all these ideas have emerged, right? So constitution is the fountainhead from where everything emerges eventually. So you start this way, fine, and then let us imagine that you have started this way, and then you will obviously talk about that we are a parliamentary system, right? And we do not follow exact or absolute separation of power, right? Because there is doctrine of collective responsibility, though it's not outrightly mentioned that there will be a strict separation between the organs because it is not very clear, right? But still, when you read Article 50, that is DPSP, separation of executive from judiciary, to an extent this is visible, right? Also, when we think of the Article 12 definition of state, right, and Article 13 the definition of law, right, and the consequent role of the judiciary with part or with respect to the part 3, that is fundamental rights. Now see, so this basic idea you will have to first bring into your answer so that a context is developed that okay, yes, the respective roles of the judiciary, executive and legislature has been defined, though between the legislature and the executive it is not very clear cut, but yes, judiciary has been given an independent, autonomous, and to an extent I would say not sovereign ultimately but quasi sovereign role. Sovereign is the constitution, ultimately we are the people, are the sovereign, right? So you start from here and then you can see that yes, what did Keshwan and Bharti do? The Keshwan and Bharti case somewhere crystallized the idea of basic structure, right? Otherwise, even prior to that, right, when you start with the Shankari Prasad case, 1951, or the First Amendment of the Constitution, creation of the Ninth Schedule, right, Articles 31, A, B, C, if you know about them, signed. So obviously the initial provision of the amendment of the Constitution led to the creation of the Ninth Schedule, which wanted to restrict judicial review. So this tussle between the judiciary and more or less the legislature and executive began, right, at the beginning or onset of the Constitution itself, right? Also, obviously, the Constitution makers did not wanted this kind of conflict, but they realized that yes, there is something called the practical administration or governance, and there's something called the philosophical justice or the judiciary. So they tried to maintain a balance between the both, and that is why Constitution was written in such detail, right? So let us understand this way that once you have defined this, then you should come to the idea that okay, why the reason, what were the basic ideas behind the Keshwan and Bharti case, right? Obviously, it was a right to property, and it was in broadly related to fundamental rights. Fine. And obviously, it was also somewhere related to your uh, individual rights and collective interest. So there were various factors guiding it, right? As the judiciary sets the tone, and right from Shankari Prasad case to, the Goloknath case, right? And later on Keshwan and Bharti case, and then Minerva Mills case. So judicial review or the nature of judicial review has been progressive. So let's not outrightly criticize judiciary, right? It has been a progressive view, right? But yes, judiciary has at times, or it has seemed to be at times, that it is encroaching into the policy domains, right? Uh, let's say, for example, when the issue that was addressed by this Keshwan and Bharti case, right? That is the parliament or legislature enjoying the plenary powers, right? The absolute powers, power to amend. So it is obvious that Supreme Court accepted that it has the power to amend, right? And Article 368, which is not a normal article, it is a substantive legislative power, right? what you can call as constituent power. That means it has the power to amend the constitution. So it has a constituent power. And so when this power has been bestowed to the legislature by the constitution, so there is no doubt that constitution somewhere had anticipated that such kind of powers would be needed by the legislature, right? So there is no restriction, right, except the doctrine of basic structure. Now this is the idea, that what was the intent? The intent was to give them power to amend, including fundamental right, but that intent does not mean that parliament can somewhere exceed its jurisdiction, can exceed its boundary, right, to undermine the very purpose for which it has been given the power. That is the idea of doctrine of basic structure. Judiciary nowhere accepts or says that we are using this basic structure doctrine to curtail or trample upon the powers of the legislature, right? So we can start with the idea and we can talk about that what were the outcomes or the implications of the doctrine of basic structure, right? So obviously basic structure first of all provides a strong influence of judiciary in restricting the legislative powers or in restricting the laws made by the legislature, right? One thing should be very clear, that Article 12, right, already talks about that the state and its laws or its decisions can be restricted or made void if they violate the fundamental right. So already Constitution has set the domain of the legislature. Fine. But by giving 368, the Constitution makers itself created a dilemma. And that probably dilemma was corrected by the judiciary in doctrine of basic structure. That is the idea. So we can say that yes, the doctrine of basic structure somewhere establishes the notion of judicial review as already envisaged in the Constitution. It makes it more specific, right? So definitely it gives judiciary or it tends to give judiciary more power to somewhere restrict the functions of the legislature and executive. Second argument can be that as the doctrine of basic structure is not defined well, it always has gray areas. It is an evolving concept. And because of that, the judiciary may have or judiciary enjoys a lot of discretion in that regard, right? Because you keep interpreting Article 21, you interpret to that extent where it becomes difficult for the executive or the legislature to, execute its decisions. So that may be one vital point. Third aspect, as far as, let's say, the increasing recourse to PIL, increasing recourse to, judicial scrutiny of administrative and executive decisions. So somewhere the notion of basic structure led to the increase in the petitions and the litigations against the government also, right? And in the beginning, judiciary was entertaining such petitions, right? Whether it is related to environment, to industries, to pollution, to garbage disposal, to managing certain affairs, to managing transport system, many areas, right? The judiciary intervened, right? So somewhere it created the ground. But then what is the way out? Obviously, the way out is that many times the judiciary has accepted the legislative and the executive decisions to be fair, right? And many times it has somewhere restricted them also, right? Suo motu, taking up the causes. So there are a lot of ways by which the judiciary, after the doctrine of basic structure, has emerged, right, or has somewhere touched upon the boundary of the policy formulation and policy execution. Right? I would not say outrightly encroach, but it has to an extent touched upon, interfered. As you know, judiciary's premise is to knock on the door and not break the door. Fine. So this you can start with, right? And then obviously you can come to more positive aspect that, okay, whether it is Minerva Mills case, right, or IR Kuleho case, or for that matter, you can talk about Fatima Bibi case, or the idea of constitutional morality and many other things which emerged, right? That was basically created to manage or to promote a better governance, right? The judiciary itself has denied the idea that no, we don't want to encroach into the policy domain, right? So in case of Sikkim having some special status, so judiciary accepted executive decisions, right? even meanwhile 370 you can say. So there are many examples where it was realized that judiciary has aided and supported the executive in making better decisions, not necessarily restricting the judiciary, right? But issues like law and order, police reforms, and there are so many areas where judiciary is working like the boss, right? The big boss. So that should not be there, right? So what exactly is the way out now? The way out now is obviously to balance how to maintain the constitutional philosophy, right, of what you can say coexistence, right, of these three organs at the same time. How to maintain the philosophy of justice uh, or independent justice provided to the people, right? How to also maintain the philosophy of the executive and the legislature has the primary role to first serve the society, not the judiciary. Right? Judiciary has to come in the last resort. So we can maintain this idea around this question, right? Obviously, doctrine of basic structure is an evolving concept, as we know. Over a period of time, yes, recently, as you know, the SC/ST classification, right? So that judgment already, Madras High Court had reinterpreted that judgment. Uh, then Supreme Court has obviously this was pending since long time, and Supreme Court has obviously reviewed the idea. Now that may be termed by some as conservative judgment, by some as the progressive judgment, right? But as Supreme Court has used a special connotation and special idea that imagine the compartment of a sleeper class or the general compartment of the train, right? The one who gets in doesn't want the other to get in, right? So obviously you have to also look at the social realities, right? So review or understand this basic doctrine or basic structure doctrine in the light of the evolving nature of social problems, and don't just end it abruptly with certain facts that you want to say. So this will be all for this idea. This was one Q&A taken. We'll take up other issues again, right? Likewise, we'll keep taking the issues. So the students who are writing mains or who are preparing on their own, they can have an understanding of how to write an answer, how to think about an idea, and how they can obviously revise through various ideas around which your GS paper 2 or GS paper 4 or many other GS papers work, right? So we'll be dealing with all of them: social justice, society, governance, polity, ethics, and likewise. So we'll take up this one by one. So today's idea was simple. This is quite uh, uh, popular as an idea, right? But we have tried to give it a different treatment. We have just tried to give you an orientation that, okay, how exactly we can fit our ideas into an answer, right? As a conclusion, like I said, we have to be progressive. We should not totally criticize either the executive or the judiciary. Yes, justice has to be provided, but there is, let's say, obviously a cost for anything. That's for justice also, right? And this also somewhere requires a robust civil society, democratic values, citizenship. People should be willing, to contribute to the governance and not merely extracting their benefit from the governance, right? So thank you so much. Keep listening to us. Keep watching. You can subscribe, right? You can also write to us, feedback, email us, whatever, right? So we'll take up the issues or the topics which interest you most likely, and we'll try to do justice to that. Fine. Thank you so much for today. See you again.